The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. Joining me today on the panel are Thomas Sanarho. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, Dom. It's good to be here.
And Jack Barazini. Hi, Jack.
Hey, Dom.
Let's get right into it. Last week, we had a discussion with Pat and Father Andrew about Wi-Fi security tips. And we got some listener feedback. We got an email from Billy Bones. I don't know if that's your real name or not, but if it's your real name, that is the awesomest name ever. You should be a pirate. Sorry, Billy. But it was a great email. He said, I just listened to the latest episode of Secrets of Tech about home security Wi-Fi tips. Is there a brand or a specific Wi-Fi router you would recommend for a large family? And this is a particularly Catholic question, right? Large families is often a Catholic thing. And yes, boy, do we have suggestions. So where would you guys start with this question? Well, where do you start with deciding what to do for a router for your home?
I would say right off the bat, you're going to want to see what your square footage is and how your house is laid out so you can pick the best device to cover what space you have.
Right, exactly. Bigger house, if you have multiple floors, if you got to cover like basement to second floor, that's going to require something stronger or more spread out.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and also realizing where your modem is a big deal. I think a lot of people forget that, if you get your modem off in the corner of a house, like I do, our modem is in the back of our house, basically. You're going to need to make some different decisions about how you organize your Wi-Fi.
Right. Yeah. So often when they bring the cable or whatever it is into the house, it's on one corner, one edge. Very rarely is it centrally located in a nice central communications closet.
Right.
If you were to build a house from scratch, I would have a central like networking hub closet.
Server room.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think going forward, we're going to have to do that.
Yeah. I think so. I think that's in the future, we're going to have to make these sorts of allowances for utilities. It's going to include internet connection. All right. So there's basically two types of router that we can look at, right? Two basic styles is the classic standalone router. It's one device that sits usually next to the modem. And then there's the mesh, which is a bridging system that helps the signal extend the signal out. Let's put it that way.
It's like a repeater.
Right. That's sort of the best analogy for it. And what's nice about mesh systems is that it's seamless. As you walk around with your device, with your phone or your laptop or pad, you're switching between these devices seamlessly, usually.
Yeah,
like all tech, there are sometimes I've run into some issues where like, why are you connected to the one on the way other side of the house? I'm right next to this one, but that thankfully doesn't happen too much. So those are the two basic questions. Although there's also a sort of a third type, which is sometimes when you get cable service or Fios, which is I have Verizon Fios, which is optical, or the other type of service, the modem, which is the device that brings the signal into your home from the provider, is also the Wi-Fi router. Which is the case that I had, which I don't know about you guys, but my general advice is you want to get off of that as soon as possible.
Yeah, I would not recommend that option. I would also, if you want to get even deeper, get your own modem. But for starters, you definitely at least want your own Wi-Fi router.
Right. We did kind of mention that a little bit last week as in the security tips, but it also goes for just for performance. You're not going to get the best performance out of that bundled router modem.
Oh no, they're terrible.
Right.
And then you can't fix it yourself. You have to take it back to the company to fix it, which is a whole nother set of issues.
You usually can't even change the password on your own.
Yeah, I was surprised. I was very thankful about the fact that my company allows me to do that, because that's one of the first things I do is always change the password on any of these things that you get.
Right. That's a good follow-on tip from last week. Is we talked a little bit about that, but yeah, change it if you can. And if you can't, it might be a good reason to go out, and you can buy your own modem. This is a sort of ancillary to the security, but you can buy your own modems. You're just going to make sure you get one that works with your particular provider. Not every modem works with every provider. But again, that might be another show we'll do,
right,
where we talk about that. Well, let's talk about the routers themselves. First, let's talk about the standalone routers. And right now, the standard for Wi-Fi, remember it used to be 802.11a or B or C and that sort of thing. Well, they figured out that using engineering terms, these engineering specifications, it just confuses people. So now they decided Wi-Fi 6, which is better than Wi-Fi 5. You know what I mean? So Wi-Fi 6 is the latest standard for Wi-Fi routers. So that's
but I have to interject here. This is it's sad because we're losing a little bit of the classic throwback, because the 802 was a throwback to when they first made this in 1980. And it was February of 1980, so 802.
Yeah,
and that's kind of like it was a date that they had put on it. Like, this is when we made the Wi-Fi standards, and so we don't have that anymore.
I miss it.
Well, that's what Wikipedia is for, to preserve that sort of thing.
There you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
So, you could basically say, for most routers that would be capable of covering a normal home, let's say, and an average number of devices. Now, because you got to think about this. We're not just talking these days about a home computer, off in the corner. Most members of a family, if they're above the age of 13 or 14, have a device these days in many families. Just in my house, which is, I know is abnormal. I have my iMac that I use for work. I have a laptop. I have two network attached storage devices that are also on the network. I have an Apple TV, which is on the network. And that's just me. And of course, my phone and my iPad. And then my wife's got a phone, and she's got her laptop. And then we've got like 5 iPads that the kids share. And and then there's all the smart home stuff, cameras, security cameras, doorbells, light bulbs. All that stuff is on your network. And so you got to think about that. And that's only going to increase over time as more and more things become, quote unquote, smart. So you want to make sure that you take into account all the things you're going to want to put on your network. And so some of these devices we'll talk about, they will accommodate up to X number of Wi-Fi devices at a time. You don't just assume, well, 25, that's plenty. Who could possibly need more than 25 devices? You'd be surprised.
Especially with a large family.
Right.
You get there fast.
So I looked up some of recommendations. So let's start with the small. If you have a small home, like even an apartment, small family, you've got just 2 spouses and a couple of younger kids, you don't have a lot of devices, you might be able to get away with the TP-Link Archer A7, which is $60. It's not all that strong, like as in the distance the signal can reach, which might actually be good for if you're in an apartment building, because that signal leakage into other people's apartments, it can get a little messy. So but it's not all that strong. It's a Wi-Fi, I think it's a Wi-Fi 5 router, so it's not the most recent the standard, so it's a one step back. But it's only $56 at Amazon right now. It's about $60. So it's affordable, and it's a nice starting point. Even like in a dorm room or a small college apartment might be. And then from there, so the brands that I kind of looked at were Synology, Netgear, Asus, and TP-Link. Synology is a standalone router. That's kind of the Cadillac. It's really, like, I use the Synology network attached storage devices. It's got a really great interface. It's like a Mac or Windows machine in a web browser. It's just really easy to use, really smart. But it's the most expensive. It's of the ones that we're looking at here in the standalone at $200. You can go even more. There are versions of these routers which go more expensive, but they're faster. They can accommodate more things, that sort of thing. So what do you guys think of this? How does it fall out for you?
For me, I think that if you have a really small space, like if you're in an apartment or a house that's like 1,500 square feet or less, you can probably get away with a standalone one. But you're going to look at the antenna strength, because anything more than like if you have anything more than like a dorm room or an apartment, you're going to want something that has a pretty decent range, because you just have one point rather than multiple points.
Right.
Especially if there's any walls between you and where your router's going to be.
Right.
Because that's gonna interfere no matter what, no matter how powerful the signal is. If there's a wall between you and the router, it's gonna reduce the signal.
Especially if you live in an old house, which might have lathe, the wire mesh in the wall with the lathe.
Right.
I lived in a
cage
rectory once that was like that, and I could barely get signal outside the rooms I was renting. So yeah, it
becomes its own kind of Faraday cage. Right?
Yes, exactly. No signal leakage. Yes, nobody can surveil me. One thing to keep in mind is you'll see references to the number of streams that a router can do. The more streams, the more expensive. The more streams means the more devices that can be using it in parallel. In other words, the more people that can be online at once using the full bandwidth available of the device.
Right.
So every stream has to be divided by the number of users who are on that stream. So that's, and these days, a lot of people are using a lot of data all together in one place with various like classes, Zoom classes and that sort of stuff. So it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and if you don't think about the home devices, you really need to, because they are pretty constantly sending some kind of signal back and forth. And they do eat up that stream connection. So
yes,
you can't forget them.
Yeah.
So that's so we'll have a link to several different ones that I recommend in the show notes. So there's a couple different TP-Link, there's an Asus, there's the Netgear Nighthawk. These are all well-known brands. They're really good. Let's talk a little bit about the other kind of routers, and this is the kind that I have, which is a mesh system. I have the Eero mesh. The latest one is the Eero 6. I have the one before that, which I suppose is Eero 5, although I don't remember the number, but I suppose it is. And what they are is there's usually a central router, so something that connects directly to your modem, and then these satellites or extenders that you put around your house. And these work pretty well, and they tend to be a little bit more expensive because you're getting multiple devices out of them. Eero, a basic Eero system, an Eero 6 with one router and one extender is $160 right now on Amazon. Eero is owned by Amazon, so something to keep in mind. Another one that's out there that you often hear about is the Google Wi-Fi mesh. And that's an interesting one that comes with 3 interchangeable pods, essentially. They're all the same, so it doesn't matter which one you connect to the modem. They all work the same. But Google, that's $200 for 3 of them. Google also sells, of course, a whole nother mesh system called Nest Wi-Fi, which is newer. And that's more like the Eero, where it has a router and an extender. And that's pretty expensive at $269 for one router, one extender. But the big difference is that each one acts as a smart speaker. So it's like you're also getting a Google Hub, or whatever they're calling them, Nest Hub these days. So something to keep in mind there. There are other brands out there. There's Ubiquity. There's a bunch of them out there. But I have experience with Eero. What about you guys? Either of you have experience with any of these?
I actually just switched to Eero in the past week. I was running off a Linksys router before. I just had one, and my house is about 2,000 square feet. We had an issue where we had the Wi-Fi router up in the corner room, kind of on the second level of the house, and it would cover about 75% of the house fine, but when you get in that back corner, it would completely cut out. So I set up the Eero. I got it in a couple days ago. Actually got it on Black Friday. And I have the 2-device system, and they're both identical. Like, it comes with the one router, and you can plug either one in as the gateway one and then use the second one as the repeater. So I just have those at opposite ends of the house, and it works fantastic.
Nice. Okay, yeah, the Eero 6, yeah, they have the identical ones. Yeah, that's true. And they also do the whole, you know, this is best for homes of this size with this many square feet. I had a similar problem. That's why I got the Eero. I had my modem comes in one corner of the house in the office where I sit, and my bedroom is on the other side of the house when my wife is often in there working on her computer or working with the kids. And it just had terrible connection all the way over there. I tried all kinds of different extenders and that sort of thing. And finally I said, that's it. I'll just get something made for it. And I did get the Eero, and it's been great ever since. I got the one with the 2 extenders, because whenever I tried one extender with the previous system, it was just that much too far. So I ended up getting, and I don't have a convenient, my house's electrical system, the way the outlets are laid out is kind of dumb. I didn't have a convenient outlet directly in the middle. So I ended up doing it with the 2 of them. But it's been great. And Eero comes with some great tools. As part
definitely.
of it. That was one of the things I was going to ask is, the mesh systems are kind of app dependent, right? You have to have an app to run them, or do they just work sort of on their own?
So to configure, that's a good point. So to configure the Eero and the Google system, you use an app on your phone. To configure most standalone routers, you get at them through a local address like 192.168, whatever, through a web browser on your network. But I think a lot of them are going toward phone app configuration for whatever reason. I'm not sure. Maybe it makes it easier for them to update the control software because it's not in the firmware. It's just an app that you download. So that might
I think it also reminds people not to just plug it in and let it go.
Right.
Like introducing people and saying, hey, you need to get your phone out and actually interact with this thing. That's a good habit to be in.
Right. It helps you keep on top of actually monitoring your network. Like the Eero will tell you how many, if you use Eero Secure, which is their security suite that you can get, it's like, I think it's $2.99 a month. So it's not that bad. And it has ad blocking and it will detect security threats. And it just gives you a bunch of different metrics so you can actually see what's going on your network rather than just completely ignoring it.
And it will tell you which devices are getting the malware intrusion attempts or getting things on the website, so you can go to your wife and say, honey, why is it your computer that's always getting the malware alerts? What are you doing? Not that ever happened to me.
Stop clicking on those links.
Yeah. Like, stop clicking on random links on Google.
I think the Eero is also really good as a family solution because it lets you set up profiles so you can put specific devices in profiles. So like if you have all your kids' computers and tablets in one profile, you can have the internet shut off to those devices after like 7 p.m.
Exactly.
And you can also filter out any content you don't want them to see.
Yep.
All right. Eero mesh it is.
You can filter out different kinds of services. I mentioned last week one of the problems I've had with it, though, is I wanted to not allow streaming services, YouTube, Disney Plus, Hulu. I don't want that. Like, I want to lock that down and not have them be able to do that on their devices. But it lumps in Apple Music, and I want them to be able to. They should be able to listen to their music. That shouldn't be the same thing. You can whitelist servers, so I'm still trying to figure out what Apple Music servers are, so I can put them on the whitelist so that they're allowed. So there's Apple Secure. I mean, not Apple. Eero Secure and Eero Secure Plus is an additional thing which adds subscriptions to 1Password for families, Malwarebytes, and Encrypt.me VPN. I was already using 1Password for families and Encrypt.me. So, and I was paying a lot more than $99 a year for all of that. So this is actually cheaper for me to get them through this. So if that's something you might want to do, it's something to keep in mind. And then you get all that content filtering and intrusion blocking and ad blocking. One interesting thing that it does do though is it tells you your activity. So I can look right now and it says my download speed right now, most recent was 102 megabits per second. My fastest upload of this week has been 120 megabits per second, which is interesting. And it gives me data usage. And I looked in November, which was interesting. My November data usage was don't tell Verizon, 4.6 terabytes.
Wow.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah. I think
not surprising, but
yeah. Well, I think
impressive.
it's because I moved my 2 terabyte iMac to an external SSD, and so my Backblaze backup must have re-uploaded all that in addition to my normal usage. So let no one tell Verizon that I used not that they don't know, but it gives you this data and it breaks it down by day, by machine, which devices are doing it. So it gives you a lot of data, which is really cool.
It also means people can jump on your Wi-Fi without you knowing, because it will notify you whenever a new device joins.
Yes, yes. And it has a nice interface that shows you all the devices, their network names. You can categorize them. So you can put things in profiles. So I have all my smart home stuff in a profile. So if something goes wrong, I can turn all the smart home stuff off from the internet, just disconnect it all at once, which is nice. Same thing with the kids profile. I can just turn it off. You guys are out of control. Off goes the internet for you. Yeah. I still have internet, but you could do that. But it also allows you to name and categorize everything, so you know what all the devices are. And once in a while, I see something on there and I go, I don't know what you are, and I'll kick it. I can kick it right off my network from the interface, and that that is. I'm sure my network has a pretty decent password, so I'm not worried that someone's getting on my network. But you could do that if you had any worries about that sort of thing. So this is kind of sounds like an ad for Eero, but it's just the one I know.
About to say that.
And it's the one that Jack knows. So
I think any mesh network, they're moving towards that more mobile app friendly management system. So.
Yeah, I feel like mesh is the future of this. Unless you live in a very small home with not a ton of devices, a mesh is going to give you the most options and the best general speed. There are specialized reasons I think you might want a high-end standalone router too, gaming and certain other things like that. But I think for average folk, I think a mesh Wi-Fi system is a good idea.
And one thing to remember is when you're buying your router, make sure that the max speed matches the speed of your ISP. So if you're paying for 350 megabits down, make sure you're buying a router that is at least 350 megabits, preferably more, just to give yourself a little bit of a buffer. But you want to make sure that you're not bottlenecking yourself with a Wi-Fi router that is slower than your ISP is providing.
Right. It used to be that any internet connection would be faster than any router, but that's not really the other way around. Any router would be faster than any internet connection, but internet connection speeds have been going up. So yes, that's that. So you want to make sure you're at least as much, but usually have more router speed. And most of the ones we've talked about here have pretty good router. Like the lowest end one I have is the TP-Link Archer A7, and that's got 1750 megabits per second, which is really high. So, yeah. But also you're subdividing that among everyone. So just that's also something to keep in mind. Like all the devices are dividing that speed up.
Another thing I to think about here too is when you are thinking about your network, if you want to delve into it a little bit and get yourself a switch that you can split your network off from your modem and kind of section it up. It can be good to do that if you want a dedicated router for one device or two devices that you want a lot of high speed for, and then another one that's a kind of a mesh router for your house. I know there's instances where you could do that. I'm doing that in my house right now, where I have my printer and my stationary computer and my servers all on a switch by themselves, directly lined in, so they don't share any of the bandwidth with anybody else.
Right.
And that way, the speeds you can maintain a little bit higher. Now, the caveat to that is you need to know a little bit of networking. You have to be able to program the switch and make sure you have all the IP addresses set up properly. But if you do know that, it can be a really neat way to increase the speeds for the things that you want.
Well, even if you don't know how to program a switch, having the Ethernet speeds will almost always be faster than Wi-Fi. So if you can run a cable from a device, a computer or other device, directly to the router and the modem, you're going to generally get better speed. So I have a 24 port router in my office here that I use to connect to the router, and I'm sorry, I have a 24 port switch. I connect to the router that connects to the modem, and all that stuff is going to be at gigabit speeds, or actually I think it's a 10 gig router. There's going to be higher speed than the Wi-Fi, and that's just better for podcasting or for Zoom meetings, so that all that other stuff than Wi-Fi, which can have signal interference from microwave ovens and other stuff that can cause signal interference. So that's another consideration, is if at some point you may want to run some cables and get higher speed if you need it. So good. I think that's a good beginning. Routers are a big topic. Networking is a huge topic. We'll probably come back to it. And if listeners, if anybody has any more questions on this thing, we're happy to discuss it, answer the questions best we can, and give any advice we can. I've set up more than a few routers and modems in rectories and in churches and in schools as well. So there may be some things we could talk about that are specific to those sorts of questions as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there are more routers that have been in Wi-Fi installed in churches in the last year that I think have been in a while. So for live streaming. All right, let's move on. But first, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the secrets of technology, including Father Paul H., Sydney O., John W., SR, and Joseph G. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the secrets of technology and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. All right, let's talk about the big news of the day. We got a few headlines. Here's one. I know we were all watching this together. This the Starship, SpaceX Starship, was launching this. We were recording this Wednesday evening. It was due to go up here on Wednesday. Well, first it was due to go up on Tuesday, December 8th, the Feast of Immaculate Conception. And they had to scrub the launch at 1 second to go, which was tough. That was a tough scrub I'm sure it was worse for them than for us, but we're all gathered around we're eating dinner, gathered around the dinner table looking at my phone because I'm like, oh, it's going to go up. And then it stops like, but then it did today on Wednesday. They were able to launch it. There was another delay and it went up, it came down, it exploded. So but the guys at SpaceX don't seem too unhappy. So what's going on?
No, they love this. This was fantastic. This was actually better than they were considering. They weren't even thinking it was going to get off of the launch pad. There was a lot of consideration that there was about a 40% chance that it was going to blow up just right there.
That kind of would have been cool too, but
I had an 11-year-old who was dying for that, and then when he watched the first half of it and then shut it off, and I said, "You didn't watch it explode?" And he's like, "What?" It was great to go back and watch it with him after that.
Yes, yes, the explosion was pretty cool. So what were they trying to do today with the launch?
Basically, they were just trying to gather data on the Raptor engines and seeing if they could even basically put a 5-story building up in the air and hover it and then flip it around, which they did all that.
Oh my gosh, it was
amazing.
It's hard to get an impression of the size of this thing, but when you think about it, if you go and watch it, you have to keep in mind that there is space on the top of that device for 32 astronauts to sit.
Wow.
That's how big this thing is. And it is really hard to wrap your mind around that, because I had one of my kids comment, "Oh, look, it's like a toaster in front." And I'm like, "No, sweetie, that's like a tool shed. That's not a toaster. That is a tool shed."
Yeah, it is
and
big.
The size is hard to get your brain around when you're used to what we're seeing launch most of the time, which is these very slender, tall devices that can only carry 4 or 5 people.
Right. How does it compare to like the Saturn V? That's still bigger, right?
The launch mass of the Saturn V is larger, but the circumference of the
Starship,
Space Starship, is bigger than the Saturn V. Like the Saturn V is really, really powerful. It's also really, really tall. The Starship is shorter and more squat, but it's bulky.
Okay. Yeah, it's I guess I'm looking at it online. There's the current version is about a little less than half the length of Saturn V, but it's bulky.
Yeah.
But the Saturn V, like I've seen the one in Cape Canaveral, they have inside the building there, and it's massive. It is incredibly huge.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but this is still, it's 164 feet tall. The
Right.
Starship, that is massive. And so it went up 7.8 miles, hovered.
Yeah.
Then they laid it on its side and let it descend like that. And then they tilted it back straight up and were trying to land it standing up. And
Yeah,
nobody
and-
expected them to be able to do that.
They didn't even expect to get as far as they did.
Yeah.
This was within the 10% range. Like
Yeah.
there was a 5% chance, I think, was what they were saying, that it would actually land. So this was really, really close, and you can almost see what happened. Like when you watch, it looks like one of the two stabilizing boosters went out, and then if you watch the flame, it sort of changes colors right there at the end.
Right.
And I think part of the problem is that there was just a bunch of like gas fuel left over right on the launch pad that caught back.
Okay.
They were saying that part of the problem was that the fuel pressure was too low. And so they got the ballast off, basically, and they hit the ground too hard.
Okay.
Man.
Yes. Elon Musk's tweet said, causing touchdown velocity to be high and rapid unscheduled disassembly, which I think is the word of the day. I'm going to name the episode that, rapid unscheduled disassembly. It's another word for crash.
Yeah. Well, and I think, somebody pointed out that no other company that's doing these launch tests is showing it to the world in this way. Blue Origin has video of their launches, but the video that they take are not live, and they're of successful launches. And if it is live, then it's of what they know is going to work. Like they've already tested it, and there's no way something's going to blow up on them. So it's really like SpaceX really is letting everybody in to watch them fail. That they were expecting this to fail. There was nobody. They would have been absolutely jubilant if it had landed and looked awesome.
Right. I meant to do that.
Right, and that's exactly what it would have been.
What amazes me is the criticism that's being leveled. They're saying, "Oh, we shouldn't be letting private companies be, doing this sort of thing, the crashing as many rockets as they do." And it's like, does no one remember NASA in the early 60s? Like they weren't sure that the Redstone rocket carrying Shepard wouldn't crash and explode on the launch pad. Like this is how we do it. We keep blowing them up until they don't.
You crash them now so you don't crash them later.
Right. Exactly. Well, and even then the shuttles, we learned so much from the two shuttle disasters that we had that taught us so much about what we need to be checking for when launch is going, what kind of things we need to be checking for in space before they come back into the atmosphere. And that's kind of the hazard and the advantage of pushing space exploration, is that it's science, and science is experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So really cool, really exciting. And if you get to watch it, watch the launch, the flight, and the landing as it is. Included just the awesome fireball that was on that launch pad.
Yeah, the whole thing is just amazing.
That's no special effect, folks. That's the real thing. So definitely don't get
watch
jaded.
it 20 times too, because it's amazing. Just back it up a few seconds, go again. Back it up a few seconds, go again.
My 7-year-old said, because you could see the nose cone of it sitting there on the launch pad after the explosion, and she said, "Oh, it must have been made of Beskar because it survived." A little Mandalorian in joke. No spoilers though. But all right. So let's move on from the exciting world of space to the world of federal monopolistic antitrust lawsuits.
I heard you nearly say boring.
Yes. Well, so I'll be honest. I find that discussion of lawsuits and that sort of stuff tear-inducing boring when I hear other podcasts talk about it. So I don't want to get into all of the politics and all of the legal stuff so much as I want to talk about what the implications are for users, the regular folk who listen to our show, frankly. And that's this case that came out just Wednesday night. The Federal Trade Commission and 40 states attorney generals, 40, have filed a lawsuit against Facebook, calling for their breakup, basically monopolistic practices, and they want them to divest themselves of Instagram and WhatsApp, and saying that they are using their monopolistic power to absorb competitors who could have one day challenged their dominance of social media. So the first question is what is, like I said, what does it mean for Facebook, for the point of view of a user? Like, what's going to happen? Is Facebook going to go away? Are we going to lose our Instagram accounts? Are they going to shut down WhatsApp? What do you think is the first here? What's it mean for us?
Those companies are way too big for them to just kind of disappear. Even independently, the valuations on them when they were first bought were astronomical, and they've only become more popular and more valuable since then. So WhatsApp and Instagram are not going to go away. Facebook is obviously not going to go away. But one of the things that is going to happen is the way that images are collated at Facebook is going to change, because they used a lot of the code from Instagram to make that happen. And they're going to have to figure out how to untwine those two things and make them both still work independently.
Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking about is I wonder if it's going to change the way Facebook moderates the site, runs our experience of it. Because I've heard a lot of complaints about the way Facebook and Instagram work. It's people complaining about, well, there's the over moderation of things. So there's that whole question and censoring and that sort of thing, but also just the messing with you when all you want to do is look at your most recent feed, and they keep hiding it on you and that sort of stuff. And I'm wondering, this isn't likely to change any of that, right?
I don't think so. Not really. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the audience is split between these services. Because, like, I use Instagram a lot, but I almost never use Facebook. And if I could get rid of the whole Facebook component of Instagram, I would be fine with that. So it's going to be interesting to see how many people who just use one service drop the other one because they don't have to have it anymore.
Right. What's fascinating to me is the way that Facebook has run Instagram is they've run it not so much as absorbing it so it isn't a competitor for Facebook, but they're running it as a competitor to crush Snapchat and TikTok. Instagram Stories was taken right out of Snapchat, and now Instagram Reels is exactly what it's TikTok, just inside Instagram. And that seems to me, if you want to accuse them of monopolistic practices or violating antitrust practice law, that's where you would look. But that's not necessarily, like, if you spin off Instagram, it's still going to have all that. So I'm not sure. Do you think that Facebook, by buying Instagram and WhatsApp, has reduced competition?
I think what you're going to find as they get further into the lawsuit is that Instagram is protected by Facebook. And so if we spin Instagram off as its own company, it's going to be harder for them to do that kind of thing where they can just, steal an IP from another company and make it their own. And that's where the real kind of breaking up of this monopoly is going to take effect, where they're not going to be able to just hide behind, the parent company of Facebook and say, we can throw as many lawyers as we want at it, and Snapchat's never going to be able to do anything to us.
One of the things that seems to me that a lot of people talk about, and maybe one of the reasons why they don't go to a different competitor social media service from Facebook, is just the hassle of starting someplace new. A lot of people in recent months have gone to Parler. A lot of people I know, which is more conducive to conservatives, or MeWe, so Parler is more of a Twitter alternative. MeWe.com is more of a Facebook alternative. There are others out there, but one of the things that holds people back is, well, I only have enough attention for one service or maybe two services. And I just don't, and all my friends are on Facebook and all my family's on Facebook, and then they're not going anywhere. Do you think that really, does that matter? Does that matter to monopolistic, the monopoly regulators at the federal government?
I don't think they really have thought about that aspect, to be honest. I think a lot of times you get people who don't even fully understand the technology who are putting forward these lawsuits. Not that I disagree with the idea of breaking up Facebook necessarily. I mean, it depends on the details. I think it's going to be interesting to see how this affects how data is stored, because if you have to break up where these companies, are they going to have to move all the data to a different server farm? How's that going to work?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that concerns me about Facebook is not that it crushes other social media services before, in their womb, before they can rise to compete. It's they use their reach into our lives and all this data that they have on all of us to do things that are not good, about that are nefarious.
Right.
And yes, I suppose if you cut them off from Instagram and WhatsApp, that's some less data that they have, but I don't know that it changes Facebook fundamentally in that respect. They still have the reach and the power that they have today, fundamentally.
Yeah.
I think the most likely thing is people just stop using WhatsApp and Instagram before they stop using Facebook.
Yeah.
That's probably true. Well, I don't know. WhatsApp has a really good international following.
That's true.
I think that I think really the biggest thing that bringing WhatsApp into the Facebook fold did was bring a bunch of international markets that they weren't able to grasp before into Facebook.
So the other thing to keep in mind is this isn't gonna be done in a year. This is probably going to take a decade or more. This is like the Microsoft antitrust lawsuits of the 90s. They got enough lawyers and enough money that it will go on for year after year after year after year. This is going to be forever.
Well, and I think one of the other things too with this lawsuit is like watching how focused it can stay, because like you're saying with that, how do we break up what Facebook is by itself? That kind of monolithic information gathering, crazy big brother sort of thing, and that's not the target of this particular lawsuit. It doesn't seem. It seems like this lawsuit is more about buying companies and kind of subsuming them. So it'll be interesting to see how much that distracts from the actual lawsuit itself. This other idea of Facebook as Big Brother,
as well as the question of which is what all the politicians are on about, is the censorship. They're really, the politicians are all about, they censor points of view, and that's not a part of this lawsuit either. So it'll be interesting to see if that stuff comes in at some point. So what does it mean for Google, Amazon, and Apple? Because they're also usually lumped in with Facebook as big tech. Are they coming for? I know that there's been some more stuff said about Google, but I mean, what are they going to say to Amazon and Apple as well, and the users
Apple
of those?
Seems safe.
Yeah,
Apple's very vertical,
right?
But I think Amazon and Google are definitely potential targets for this same kind of thing.
Right. Apple, while it has very popular phones and other devices, it's not the majority player in the market. They can clearly say, we're, even with all those iPhones out there, the Android is a bigger market. So that they seem fairly safe there. Yeah. Amazon, I could see should maybe be a little worried about being perceived as a monopoly, but given that it's the 800-pound gorilla of e-commerce and out there, and it's hard for anyone to compete, even a big company like Walmart and Google in search. It's just it's the dominator, and so that's something to keep in mind. And are there other companies that should be worried out there that we should be thinking about?
Well, I think when you talk about Google, you have to remember to talk about Alphabet, which is the parent company that they spun off for exactly this reason, to kind of pull the focus off of Google and say, oh, well, no, we have this corporation that's interested in tech investment, and we just have people that are interested in doing that, and yes, they're not affiliated with Google directly, but it's not like they don't benefit from being part of the same parent company as Google.
Like there isn't the same people setting the direction for all of the parts of Alphabet, right? It's interesting. I think for our listeners, from their point of view, there isn't much to say. There isn't much to glean from this. We don't know what it means for us yet, and I think that's the bottom line so far. just bears watching, and we'll keep an eye on it. But
except that we get to see Mark Zuckerberg sit in front of Congress and be as much of a robot as he always is, which is always funny to me.
Are we sure Mark Zuckerberg is still alive and that it is not a simulation? But possible. All right. Well, speaking of Google and Alphabet, there's another headline. YouTube is now saying that it's changing how it will handle. This is not about politics here, so I just want to say that off the bat. This is more about how YouTube censors. Anyway, it's changing the policy for how it handles videos about the 2020 presidential election. It will remove new videos that, quote, mislead people by claiming that widespread fraud or errors influence the outcome of the election. Now, whether or not you believe that, and that I'm not going to make any come down on either side on that. From my point of view, it seems fairly chilling that they're saying you're not allowed to express your belief in this about this public policy thing, this public thing that affects all of us. You're not allowed to say, I think there was fraud. And that, because today we're talking about the 2020 presidential election. What is it going to be tomorrow that we're not allowed to talk about in this basically privately owned public square? What do you guys think of this?
I think it's a hard one. I mean, I understand the desire to kind of tamp down on just basically how this year has gone in either direction. But the problem is YouTube is a private company, so they technically have the right to do that, but they are kind of the de facto place where you go for videos. So censoring YouTube is essentially censoring someone at this point.
Right. It's just like Google delisting someone. If you're not,
right,
you can have a website, but if you can't be found on Google, then you may as well not exist.
Can I just say we've become lazy interneters? I think ultimately that's like the internet is fantastic, but it has made us incredibly lazy. And that's not even just in regards of like, fact checking or anything like that. What I'm talking about more is we have allowed these hubs to arise without considering the fact that the internet itself is a hub of information.
Right.
And so we have, Amazon is the biggest marketplace, but why? Facebook is the biggest social media site, but why?
Right. And Google is the place where you go to find things, but it doesn't have to be. There can be other search engines. Like Bing is a search engine, and there are other ways. Yeah. I mean, Yahoo was the first search engine, and so you're right. What we've done was we've gone to whatever service has made it easy. If I want to watch a video, if I just go to YouTube, that I can watch a video on YouTube. There are other sites. There's Vimeo and there's Dailymotion and there's all these other places. But for whatever reason, we all just congregate to the same place. I think part of it is just the hassle of remembering to go different places. And like you say, we're lazy interneters. It's easier if we have one bookmark as opposed to a bunch, I guess.
Right. It would be nice if we remembered that the internet is a distributed network and actually used it like a distributed network rather than letting everything conglomerate into one spot.
Is there a human tendency to do that? To want to narrow down rather than have many options?
I think it's just ease of use.
Yeah. I do.
It's the agora, right? It's the common meeting place.
I'd like to talk to like an economist or a behavioral psychologist and talk about that. Like, I think people tend to have this desire to have fewer options. Not in a they would never say it that way, but I want to winnow down to I go to the grocery store. These are the brands I buy. The grocery store is filled with all kinds of brands, but I usually just only consider the ones I always get because it's easier. I don't want to have to think about it. I just get that one. And I think it's similar to how people use the internet, how they listen to music, how they watch movies and TV shows. They want to narrow down their options instead of expand them.
Well, I think you see that even with the way people use Netflix. Like, you get on Netflix and you spend an hour looking for something to watch because there's so many different options rather than just picking something. And
at
a certain point, it's easier just to be like, I just want one thing. Give it to me.
And it's not new. When I was a kid, I would go to the bookstore. My mom would be in Lane Bryant shopping for women's clothes. I hated Lane Bryant. Sorry, I think it's gone now. I hated that store. She would send me off to Laureate's or whatever the B. Dalton. I'd be in there and I'd be staring at the books and I'd have, $10 burning a hole in my pocket and I couldn't figure out what book to buy or worse, Blockbuster. A wall full of videos, which is basically what you're saying with Netflix is. Yeah. And so what did they do? They gave us recommendation engines, Netflix and whatever. And these are you liked this stuff, so you'll probably like this. And what happens is our options get narrowed down to the things they recommend to us.
Yeah, and we hit that filter bubble.
Yes. Yeah. It's fascinating because sometimes I go to the various streamers and I'm like, it's the same old stuff over and over again. And my friends are like watching these amazing things. And I'm like, I haven't seen that. Like, what are you watching?
On my list yet.
Exactly. So I think it's an interesting question is, that the narrowing down of choice, it's I think most people would say they want more choice, but I think by our behavior, we prefer less.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to start evaluating where we're making choices. You look at geniuses, and I'm going to use that term loosely, but like Steve Jobs, who wore the same outfit every day. And the reason he did that was because he didn't want to waste his creative energy on choosing clothes in the morning. And I think we could all do with a little bit more of that intentional choice, that we limit the things that don't matter to us as much in the way we're making choices. And some of that is consciously and intentionally avoiding those filter bubbles by, doing only new videos or going only to your subscription pages on YouTube or, where you can. I know Facebook is notorious for not allowing you to filter by new, but to filter by new instead of by trending.
Right. We talk about that intentional winnowing of choice. It brings to mind, monks in the cell. They get rid of all of these worldly things. They wear a hat, the same habit every day. They eat the same food all the time. They don't have all this extra stuff because winnowing it away lets them save that brain power, the spiritual power for what's important, which is prayer and work, ora et labora. And I think there's something to that. And I think that's really what materialism, that the church's warning against materialism is about. It's not so much about the stuff, but it's about how it affects us and that attention. And I think being more intentional about how we use the internet and not being dragged along by our nose by these companies is part of that. I think that's a good point. And like we talked about with the social dilemma when we had that discussion. Yeah. So
it was never the fruit on the tree. It was the act of taking the fruit that was the sin, right?
That's exactly
what it comes back to.
Right. You want to be intentional about the trees. There are other trees you could have gone to. You had to go to the Facebook tree, Adam and Eve, instead of to all the other trees.
Exactly.
All right. I think I've taken that too far. So let's move on then to our picks of the week. This is our fun time when we make choices of things that we want to talk about. So, Jack, why don't you hit me with your pick of the week this week?
All right, my pick of the week is a YouTube channel called Technology Connections. I discovered it recently, and I've been watching pretty much just that. It's this guy, and he'll go through the history of all these different technologies, a lot of them retro technologies, which I find really interesting. One of my main interests outside of technology is history, and he kind of crosses that divide where he talks about the history of different things. So he has a really good series on the history of analog video, which is absolutely fascinating.
Yes.
Something I really like about it is how when you look at all these older technologies before everything was microchips, all the insane, ingenious ways that people came up with displaying video or sending radio or all this stuff. And it's just really absolutely fascinating if you're interested in how things work.
I agree. I love this channel. Think of something like a simple desk fan, which is a 120-year-old technology. And it is fascinating how engineeringly complex that is. It's just the engineering problems that were solved 100 plus years ago. I loved it. And he has such an entertaining understated presentation style.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it.
And the pacing is so good on his videos.
No, it is
too.
really good.
Yes, it's
just
not
fun
breakneck, frantic.
No.
It's really good.
Even just simple things you don't think about, like how stereo sound works on a vinyl record, is absolutely fascinating. Just all those different things.
Well, I tell you, this past summer, I was looking at getting a portable air conditioner for my office here and going back and forth whether I should do it or not. And his video on why you shouldn't get portable air conditioners was defining for me. Great explanation, really
We're buying
thorough.
our next refrigerator based on his recommendation about freezers.
Nice.
Exactly, right. I actually I'll have to look at that. I'll have to get that link from you because I'm in the market for a freezer. But it is a great channel. It's a good pick. I love that. All right, Thomas, what's your pick?
Okay, so my pick is probably the nerdiest thing I'm going to share on this channel. It is, and it's a pen. It's an analog device, but it's my current favorite pen. I am a huge pen nerd. I went to the doctor the other day and had a fantastic conversation that cost me $90 with him about his fountain pen that he was using. But anyway, this pen is not a fountain pen. This is a four ink pen by Pilot. It's called the Pilot High Tech Coletto. And if you've ever had one of those old Bic pens that's got the red, black, blue, and green ink in it,
I wanted one of those so much when I was a kid.
Yeah, see, and you love those things,
yes.
right? Well, here's the deal. This one, not only does it have 4 inks, but you can replace them. So you pop the top off the back of it, and you can replace the inks by just pulling one out and putting a new one in. And they come with all sorts of colors. Mine, actually, I have a pencil on it as well, a mechanical pencil. So it's a
awesome.
0.5 lead mechanical pencil that you can click out. They're well designed, well constructed. They're dirt cheap. I think the regular body costs about $8, and then the inks themselves cost about $20, but you get like 10 different inks in it, and so you can just switch them out. They last a pretty good long while. I was surprised at how long they last too. They're gel inks, so they're the rollerball gel inks, so they write really nicely. Very, very much recommend this pen for anybody who likes pens or who cares about what they're writing with at all.
I'm looking at it, and they get you can get eraser in it, you can replace one of the refills with an eraser. Different kinds of ink you can get in, all the different colors. This is pretty amazing. Wow. Yeah. This is awesome.
It's a game changer, man. It really I'm a huge, I like fountain pens, so I like writing with fountain pens. But when I found this thing, I forswore my fountain pens, and I'm going with this almost uniquely.
Have you tried jamming all the different ones down at once like you used to as a kid, though? That's the important question.
I don't want to. It's too nice. but you can't. I know you can't, because I've looked at the inside of the pen, because I've started trying to think about how I could 3D print one of these.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, Pilot pens. I'm a Pilot G2 user. I love the Pilot pens, and I love the way it feels. So I heartily recommend the Pilot pens myself. So the Pilot High Tech Coletto. We'll have a link. You can check it out. So my pick is based on something I just picked up at the Apple store when I was there replacing my lost Apple Pencil, which is a whole nother story. I don't want to get into it, too painful to talk about yet. But while I was there, I wanted, this year I decided I'm putting outdoor Christmas lights out. I haven't done that in a long time, many years, but 2020 is the year for outdoor Christmas lights. We all need a little more light in our lives. But being me, I'm not just going to get regular lights that I have to, like a caveman, walk out and unplug every night and plug in every night and unplug. I wanted something that was automated. So I picked up the Belkin Wemo Wi-Fi smart outdoor plug, which is HomeKit compatible. Of course, it also works with Echo and Google and that too, and it works like you expect. It has 2 outlets on it. It even you can actually screw it into the wall, so it's not laying in like a puddle of water in the rain. But it also has outlet covers, so you can close it off and it will block out rain. I also wrap mine in gaffer tape just for double extra sure to keep the rain and snow out. But and setting it up, like all HomeKit or smart home stuff, It's harder than it should be. I don't know why. Like, it's finding, never finds it. You know what I mean? That whole nonsense. And then you do it 3 more times, and then finally it sees it. I don't know what the problem is. It's like, hold your phone near it. It's literally on top of it. Like, why can't you see this? Right. I can see it. Why can't you? Anyway, but once I got it set up, I now have it set with at 30 minutes before sunset, the lights go on. And at sunrise, the lights go off. I keep them on all night. I have solar panels, so I don't worry about that too much. I get lots of solar power. So, but I like to have them on all night. But they go on and off automatically, and I can put them on controls and all that sort of stuff. So it's and it's $40, but they had a sale going on, so it was on sale for a little bit. It might still be on sale when you go to check it out again for $25 on the Belkin site. So give it a check. But go ahead.
So you're like a 21st century Clark Griswold?
Yes. I was saying to my wife, we don't have enough lights yet. You cannot see it from space. So we'll be. I was, as I plugged it in, I heard the music in my head from the thing, da 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 da. You know, the whole Hallelujah chorus, and so yeah, I had that totally in mind. I'm going to get there. I did threaten to put up an inflatable AT-AT with reindeer antlers and Rudolph nose.
That sounds perfect.
I got vetoed on that one, unfortunately.
Oh, man. This is the way.
Anyway, it is the Christmas way. Anyway, so I think that should do it for us before we get a little too crazy. What do you think of our discussion? We'd love to hear from our listeners. We always love getting your questions or your comments. And we hope to get more from you. If you have questions on Wi-Fi routers or anything else we've discussed, we'd love to hear from you. You can do that by commenting at sqpn.com/technology or at the SQPN Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to technology@sqpn.com. And you'll find links of everything we talked about from our discussion and our picks of the week on our show notes at sqpn.com. If you can, we really do appreciate it when you write a review for us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from. It really does help, actually, when you write a nice review there. It helps us get noticed and more listeners, and it really does help a lot. And when you, of course, share the podcast with your friends. So until next time, Jack Barazzini, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of technology.
Thanks, Tom.
And Thomas Cerner, sorry about that. Thank you as well.
It was a pleasure being here.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.